Let's talk about diamonds. We're about to pull back the curtain on one of the most brilliant, most successful marketing illusions of all time. It's an incredible story about power, psychology, and the art of creating staggering value out of, well, basically thin air.
You've heard this line, right? Of course you have. It's one of the most famous slogans in history, and it feels timeless, like it's some piece of universal truth, connecting diamonds with unbreakable, eternal love. But here's the crazy part. That timeless idea, it's not even 100 years old.
You see, that entire slogan, that whole idea, is built on an even bigger assumption, that diamonds are these incredibly rare, precious stones. That's what justifies the price, isn't it? Well, that brings us to the one simple question that unravels this whole thing. And the answer might just blow your mind. Far from being rare, diamonds are actually one of the most common gemstones on our planet. Yeah, common. So if they're not rare, why in the world do they cost so much? Well, that's where our story really gets interesting.
See, the value wasn't something that was dug out of the ground. It was manufactured. For the better part of a century, one company, a massive cartel really, completely engineered the very concept of a diamond's worth by getting its hands on nearly every single rough diamond on the planet.
Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. At its absolute peak, the De Beers Company controlled somewhere between 80 and 90% of the entire world's rough diamond supply. This was, without a doubt, one of the most effective monopolies in modern history.
So, how did they do it? They perfected a system they called single-channel marketing. Now, it sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. Imagine if every major diamond mine in the world agreed to sell everything they found to just one buyer, De Beers. That single buyer then becomes the world's only seller. They control the entire pipeline. So here's how it worked day to day. All the mines sold their diamonds to De Beers. De Beers would then sort them into these little boxes they called sites. Then they'd offer those boxes to a very exclusive hand-picked group of buyers. And get this, the price was completely non-negotiable. Take it or leave it. By controlling this one big tap, they could keep prices artificially high no matter how many new diamonds were actually being discovered. But a system like that only works if everyone plays along, right? So what happened if a country or a mine got brave and decided to sell diamonds on their own? Well, De Beers had a pretty ruthless answer for that. This whole episode with Zaire is just the perfect case study. Back in '81, Zaire, which was sitting on a ton of industrial diamonds, decided to go it alone. De Beers didn't respond with lawyers, they responded with diamonds. They just opened up their massive vaults and flooded the market with stones, just like Zaire's, which completely crashed the price. Within months, Zaire was financially wrecked and had no choice but to rejoin the cartel. That's some serious power. But controlling the supply? That was only half the battle. You also have to control the demand. And De Beers had this huge problem. What if people started reselling the diamonds they already owned? A big secondhand market would make prices collapse. They needed to make sure a diamond was something you never sold. And this is where their genius really kicks in. Their ad agency, N.W. Iyer, came up with a brilliant strategy. Transform a mineral into an emotion. They would tie this hard, eternal stone to the idea of marriage and forever love. An engagement ring wasn't an investment you could cash in. No, it was a priceless symbol you would keep forever, passed down to your kids. And hey, you've probably heard that you should spend 2 months' salary on an engagement ring, right? Did you think that was some ancient tradition, your grandmother's advice? Nope. It was a line from a De Beers ad campaign, created for one reason, to get people to spend more money. And wow, did it work. But like they say, no empire lasts forever. And starting in the late 20th century, the De Beers cartel, which seemed totally invincible, really started to show some cracks. New discoveries and new technologies began to challenge everything. Huge diamond finds in Russia and Australia brought new players to the game who just refused to join the syndicate. And at the same time, antitrust lawsuits started piling up. The result? De Beers' market share absolutely plummeted, from that incredible 80+% all the way down to around 30% today. The single channel was broken for good. And then came the ultimate game changer, technology. Scientists finally perfected a way to grow diamonds in a lab. And look, we're not talking about fake or cubic zirconia here. These are real diamonds.
They are chemically, physically, and optically identical to the ones dug out of the earth. The only difference is their origin story. And this chart shows what that really means. Because you can produce lab-grown diamonds at scale, they completely shatter that old illusion of scarcity. A 1-carat lab diamond can be up to 90% cheaper than a mined one of the exact same quality. This is a direct threat to the entire price structure that was so carefully built over the last century. So all of this brings us to today. The myth of scarcity has been broken, first by new discoveries, and now definitively by technology. And it forces us to ask some really deep questions about what value even means anymore. I mean, how do you view a company like De Beers? On one hand, you could say they brought stability and order to a chaotic industry. On the other, they ruthlessly crushed any competition and artificially inflated prices for all of us for decades. Your perspective really depends on where you're standing.
Think about it. If a diamond isn't rare, and if you can create an absolutely identical version in a lab for a tiny fraction of the cost, what are you actually paying for when you buy a mined one? Is it the history, the story? Or is it just the lingering power of that 100-year-old marketing campaign? And this leads to a final, much bigger question, because this really isn't just about diamonds anymore. What happens when technology can 3D print a perfect designer handbag or lab grow any precious material? The diamond story might just be the first chapter in a much bigger saga about the collision of technology and luxury. It makes you wonder, what is value when scarcity is no longer real?